First, we must firmly support free trade. Work together to promote inclusive and beneficial economic globalization. Economic globalization is a historical trend in which countries engage in division of labor, cooperation, complementary advantages, and mutual benefit. China and many other countries have benefited from this and achieved rapid development together. On the contrary, there are no winners in tariff wars or trade wars. They not only increase global production and trade costs, but also lead to the fragmentation of the world economy. This undermines the allocation of global resources. Research by the World Trade Organization shows that under the most favored nation treatment clause, the share of global trade conducted has dropped from 80% at the beginning of last year to 72%. According to estimates by the International Monetary Fund, economic fragmentation could result in a loss of about 7% of global GDP. This is not in the interest of any country. Although economic globalization is not perfect and may give rise to certain problems for some parties, reject economic globalization altogether and retreat back into self-imposed isolation. The right approach to economic globalization is not to completely deny it and return to being isolated islands. The correct path should and can only be to engage in dialogue and work together to find solutions. We must firmly uphold multilateralism and promote the improvement of a more just and reasonable international economic and trade order. At present, the multilateral trading system is facing severe challenges not seen in years. The unilateral actions and trade agreements of some countries clearly violate the basic principles of the World Trade Organization and rules, severely undermining the international economic and trade order. As President Xi Jinping has pointed out, the more difficult the times, the more we must uphold the original aspiration of peaceful coexistence and firmly maintain our confidence in win-win cooperation. Multilateralism is the right path for maintaining international order and stability and for promoting human development and progress. In the face of rules, everyone should be equal. A very small number of countries should not enjoy privileges based on their strength. The world cannot revert to the law of the jungle, where the weak are prey to the strong. Every country has the right to safeguard its legitimate interests. Since joining the World Trade Organization, China has always strictly abided by WTO rules and earnestly fulfilled its commitments. Moreover, China has proactively made even greater contributions. Last year, China solemnly announced that it would not seek new special and differential treatment in current and future WTO negotiations. China will continue to firmly uphold the WTO-centered multilateral trading system based on rules. We firmly support the reform of multilateral institutions such as the WTO and the International Monetary Fund. We aim to enhance the authority of the multilateral trading system, its effectiveness and its inclusiveness. We seek to increase the representation of countries in the global south and developing nations. China welcomes mutually beneficial trade agreements among countries, but such agreements should comply with WTO rules. They must not harm the interests of third parties. Third, we must adhere to win-win cooperation, work together with wisdom to expand the pie of cooperation, and join forces to solve development challenges. At present, the world economy lacks sufficient growth momentum. The International Monetary Fund predicts that the global economic growth rate in 2026 will be 3.1%, lower than the pre-pandemic historical average of 3.7%. What is even more concerning is that issues of development equity are becoming increasingly prominent. The cause of sustainable development is facing severe challenges. A report released by the United Nations shows that among the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, it is estimated that more than two-thirds will not be achieved on schedule. On the path of development, it should not be a zero-sum game where one wins and the other loses, but rather a symphony of shared resonance and cooperation. We must work together to make the pie of development bigger. This is more important than competing with each other for a share of the pie. Jointly solving problems in cooperation is more effective than blaming each other. China has always attached great importance to its own development and to driving the common prosperity of its trading partners. We are committed to enlarging the global economic and trade pie. We have never deliberately pursued a trade surplus. We are not only willing to be the world's factory, but even more willing to be the world's market. However, many times it is China that wants to buy, but the other party is unwilling to sell. Trade is affected by the over-securitization of issues. At the same time, we must also recognize that the service sector currently accounts for more than 2/3 of global GDP. For a long time, China has consistently run large surpluses and deficits in service trade. However, we have never felt disadvantaged because of this. Therefore, China is willing to leverage the advantage of its ultra-large-scale market. We will make greater efforts to expand imports and strengthen win-win industrial cooperation so that all countries can better share the opportunities brought by China. Fourth, we insist on mutual respect and equal consultation and are adept at using dialogue to properly manage differences and resolve issues. Over the past year, China-US economic and trade relations have experienced some ups and downs. At the summit meeting between the two heads of state in Busan, South Korea, and under the guidance of the consensus reached in 4 phone calls, the economic and trade teams of China and the US have held 5 rounds of consultations in succession. In accordance with the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, both sides have properly handled some prominent issues in the economic and trade fields. This has maintained the overall stability of economic and trade relations. Once again, the facts have proven that when it comes to China and the US, confrontation only leads to mutual harm. Both sides should and are able to achieve mutual success and shared prosperity. This benefits both countries as well as the world. The situation with China-US economic and trade consultations also fully demonstrates that as long as both sides can negotiate on an equal footing and move toward each other, there are always more solutions than problems. Frankly speaking, countries around the world have different social systems. Development systems differ, and histories and cultures are diverse. In the process of development, exchange, and interaction, it is inevitable that there will be some disagreements and frictions. Sometimes these are simply misunderstandings. The key is to uphold an attitude of equality, respect, and mutual benefit. We must persist in dialogue to build mutual trust. Disputes should be resolved through consultation, not by seeking answers in confrontation and opposition, but rather through communication and negotiation to find a way forward. We should explore paths to win-win and multi-win outcomes. China is a trading partner to all countries, not a rival. China's development is an opportunity for the world economy, not a threat. As for some disagreements and misunderstandings that arise in international economic and trade cooperation, China advocates enhancing mutual trust, bridging differences, and solving problems through equal consultation.
The report you mentioned once again demonstrates that China's vast market is a tremendous opportunity for the world. Establishing a presence in China means gaining a head start, and investing in China brings substantial returns. The success stories of American companies in China prove that cooperation between China and the United States benefits both sides. Promoting stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China-US relations serves the common interests of both parties. This year marks the start of the 15th five-year plan. China's economy is poised for growth, with its momentum upgrading. China will continue to serve as a stable engine, an oasis of growth, and a cradle of innovation for the world economy. We welcome companies from all countries, including American enterprises, to seize the opportunities presented by China's high-quality development and to share in the tremendous benefits of a trillion-dollar market. The Chinese government attaches great importance to the safety of Chinese citizens overseas. For some time now, China has been actively cooperating with Cambodia to combat cross-border telecom and online fraud crimes, achieving remarkable results. The Chinese embassy in Cambodia is maintaining communication and coordination with the Cambodian side and carrying out related work. A spokesperson for the Philippine Coast Guard has maliciously spread false information about China and wantonly smeared China's image. China strongly condemns this and has lodged a strong protest with the Philippine side. Some individuals in the Philippine military, driven by personal political motives, have repeatedly made outrageous and absurd remarks. Such behavior that incites confrontation is truly despicable. We sternly warn the relevant individuals on the Philippine side to immediately stop their provocations and stop distorting the truth, or else they will inevitably pay the price for their actions. We have taken note of the relevant reports. China has always maintained that the concept of national security should not be overly broadened. China has repeatedly stated its position on the issue of Greenland. International law, based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, is the foundation of the current international order and must be upheld. We urge the US side to stop using the so-called China threat as an excuse to seek personal gain.
At Davos, China's Vice Premier He Lifeng was reported to have emphasized cooperation and warned against trade conflicts in remarks that align with China's long-standing economic cooperation stance. According to reports, Chinese officials claim that U.S. tariff threats around Greenland use the so-called China threat as justification, a characterization that cannot be independently verified. Over the past year, Sino-U.S. economic and trade relations have weathered some turbulence, He Lifeng reportedly stated. Guided by the consensus reached during the Busan summit and 4 phone calls between our 2 heads of state, we have properly addressed prominent issues in the economic and trade sphere based on the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, thereby maintaining overall stability in our economic and trade relations. He added, facts have once again demonstrated that cooperation between China and the United States benefits both sides, while confrontation harms both. He referenced past high-level talks between Chinese and U.S. leaders that Beijing says helped manage tensions without independent confirmation of a lasting stabilizing effect. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun on Monday urged Washington to stop using the so-called China threat as a pretext for advancing what he described as self-serving economic and geopolitical interests. His comments responded to reported U.S. tariff threats linked to Greenland. China has repeatedly clarified its position on the issue of Greenland, Guo stated at a regular press briefing in Beijing. International law, based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, forms the foundation of the current international order and must be upheld. We urge the U.S. to cease using the so-called China threat as an excuse to pursue self-serving interests. Reports indicate that U.S. discussions included tariff threats tied to Greenland policy, though precise terms and implementations remain unverified publicly. Trump has reportedly suggested tariffs on countries that don't go along with Greenland and has claimed Washington must act to prevent China and Russia from taking Greenland, language Beijing strongly rejected. At Davos, He Lifeng reportedly made China's position on trade wars unambiguous. Economic globalization represents an irreversible historical trend where countries leverage their comparative advantages through division of labor and cooperation, achieving mutual benefit and win-win outcomes. He was reported to have said, China and many other nations have benefited from this process, realizing rapid development together. He continued with a direct warning, according to reports. Conversely, tariff wars and trade conflicts produce no winners. They not only raise global production and trade costs, but also lead to economic fragmentation and disrupt the efficient allocation of global resources. In line with broader Chinese messaging, he emphasized that trade fragmentation could harm global economic growth, a theme consistent with multilateral institutions' general warnings. He reportedly referenced concerns about declining most favored nation trade shares and potential GDP losses from economic fragmentation. The Vice Premier reportedly acknowledged that economic globalization is not perfect and may encounter setbacks, but argued against retreat. This should not lead to a wholesale rejection of economic globalization or a retreat into self-isolation. The correct path forward must be to find solutions through dialogue and steer the course of economic globalization in a positive direction. According to reports, he framed China as supportive of multilateral trade rules and critical of unilateral measures, reflecting Beijing's stated stance at the forum. The multilateral trading system is currently facing unprecedented challenges, he reportedly stated. The unilateral practices and trade agreements pursued by some countries blatantly violate the fundamental principles and rules of the World Trade Organization, severely undermining the international economic and trade order. He reportedly invoked President Xi Jinping. As President Xi Jinping has pointed out, the more difficult the times, the more we must uphold the original aspiration of peaceful coexistence and strengthen our confidence in win-win cooperation. Multilateralism is the right path for safeguarding the stability of the international order and advancing human development and progress. His language reportedly sharpened further. All nations should be equal before the rules. A tiny minority of countries should not enjoy privileges based on self-interest, and the world must not revert to the law of the jungle, where the strong prey on the weak. Back in Beijing, spokesperson Guo Jiakun linked the tariff threats to broader U.S.-China economic relations, emphasizing that China's market continues to offer major opportunities for global growth, including for American companies. The report you mentioned here demonstrates that China's vast market represents a global opportunity, Guo said, responding to a survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in China showing U.S. companies remain optimistic about market growth. Positioning in China means seizing the initiative. Investing in China yields substantial returns. He pointed to American business success in China as evidence that stable economic ties benefit both sides. Success stories of American companies in China demonstrate that cooperation between China and the U.S. benefits both sides. Promoting stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China-U.S. relations aligns with the shared interests of both nations. Looking ahead, Guo framed China as an engine for global growth. This year marks the beginning of China's 15th five-year plan. China's economy is poised for momentum and upgrading. It will continue to serve as a stable engine, an oasis of growth, and a cradle of innovation for the global economy. We welcome enterprises from all countries, including U.S. companies, to seize opportunities in China's high-quality development and share in the super dividends of a trillion-dollar market. European officials at Davos were reported to express concerns about U.S. tariff threats' effects on transatlantic cooperation, framing these as a risk to unity. EU officials reportedly warned that such disputes could trigger a dangerous downward spiral in transatlantic relations and damage economic ties on both sides of the Atlantic. EU officials reportedly stressed that Greenland's security should be handled within NATO and cautioned that such disputes could benefit geopolitical rivals while diverting attention from shared priorities such as support for Ukraine. He Lifeng reportedly closed his Davos address with a direct appeal to the global audience. China is a trading partner to all nations, not a rival, he declared, according to reports. China's development presents opportunities for the global economy, not threats. He emphasized dialogue over confrontation. Regarding disagreements and misunderstandings arising in international economic cooperation, China advocates enhancing mutual trust through equal consultation to bridge differences and resolve issues. We must not seek answers in confrontation and opposition. Instead, we should explore paths to win-win and multi-win outcomes. The message from Beijing reflects its stated position. As reported tariff tensions escalate, China positions itself as a defender of free trade, multilateralism, and global cooperation. Whether this framing gains traction or whether U.S. pressure reshapes the international economic order remains an open question as tensions continue.